Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, shoppers, choppers and showstoppers, welcome along to the Joe Spiver YouTube channel where we discuss books and little else, and I shall pounce on the words of our great poet, the 6th Baron Lord George Gordon Byron of Newstead Abbey, and say that I awoke one morning and found myself famous. There I was, just making an innocent little top 10 classics that you should read with me in 2024, and lo and behold, the algorithm did its best and most dirty, devious work, and for some reason put me up on the billboards of so many For You pages. And what was our sort of very little tight closet of, our nice little fellowship that we had going on there has almost doubled in the space of 2 or 3 festive days. So I am feeling extraordinarily fortunate, extraordinarily well liked and self-satisfied just now. For those of you that are new, I am a, what would you say, a ceaselessly arrogant and mercantile young gentleman who seeks to mask such arrogance and such avarice behind a veil of bookish pretension. I'm just looking merely for an outlet for my self-satisfied sort of peculiarities on YouTube, and so yes, I have a booktube channel. I discuss books in depth, as it were, which is what we're going to be doing today. I do book hauls, I do top 10s, I do tags, and I do every now and then I do a Slashing at Hack series where I take a magazine from a supermarket and review it as well. So yes, if you don't know, if you're new here, then find yourself a partner who isn't new here, and you can consult with them and discuss. But yes. Let us, first of all, hopefully I can solidify the fact that fame shall not change me. I do at the moment feel like a statue in the middle of Vienna or something, to which some of the tourists, under which some of the tourists congregate and have their picture taken, but then occasionally pigeons do poo on them as well. But anyway, I'm just rambling on. So, welcome to your first video watching of Random Reviews, a series where I take a book that I have read over the last couple of days and either tear it to bits or, either condemn it or congratulate it on some of its goodness, some of its badness, some of its positives and negatives. And today, ladies and gentlemen, is no different. We have Anthony Trollope's Dr. Thorne. I was fortunate enough to be given this by one of my closer family members, one of my nearest and dearest over the Christmas period, and I haven't rattled through it because, of course, I'm invited to endless soirees over the Christmas period, and so haven't been able to sit down for 4 or 5 hours a day, as is my wont and routine, so it's taken me a little longer than it otherwise would do, but this is the 3rd novel in Anthony Trollope's Barsetshire series, focusing on the eponymous Dr. Thorne, who is a stolid, dependable, calm, courteous and committed country practitioner in the village of Greshamsbury, near Barset, where many of Trollope's other novels were staged and set. But because he is so caring and committed and stolid, he is also, I think, for lots of the novel, really rather benign and insipid and a bit really sort of vapid and inoffensive, and therefore a little dull. Of course, much of the narrative depends upon that stolidity, so we'll get to that a little bit later. But yes, this is Dr. Thorne, who has, at the start of the novel, a brother called Henry Thorne, who jollies off with, I think, essentially what amounts to a stable girl, who happens to be the brother of a Roger Scatcherd, who is, again, when the novel opens, he is a unforgivably lecherous, nasty human being who flies off the handle. Is he's completely in the employ of alcohol. He's completely beleaguered by it and cannot get beyond its grasp. And so when Dr. Thorne's brother goes off with his sister and they have a child and the match is seen as ungainly, Roger goes off and sees to it that Henry meets his maker and kills him, essentially, for which Roger obviously is imprisoned and goes off to jail, and Dr. Thorne takes the small child of that tiff and names it after his sister, names it Mary, and yes, takes care of her in Greshamsbury at his country practice. And then we also, Mary Thorne, by the time we get into the meat and the sort of gritty of this novel is, what will she be? She'll be late teens, early 20s, and she is goodness me, she's not disputatious, but she's argumentative. She's very, very, very willing to stand up for herself. But otherwise, if not, unless she's provoked, she is courteous and calm, much like her father. She is, her uncle. What the hell am I talking about? And yeah, she's beautiful. Yeah, she's a wonderful human being whom everybody can't help but admire. But of course, because of the way the way she's been brought up and the match that she has sprung from. She is looked down upon as somebody of poor blood and a little bit of a deplorable and undesirable in the community as regards marital statuses. Next up we have the Greshams of Greshamsbury, who are the baronets. They have, as most of Trollope's aristocracy do, they are very, very asset rich and cash poor. They have all sorts of land and all sorts of buildings and all sorts of quagmires and the rest of it, horses and dogs, anything that you could possibly want in those eras. But you sense, particular sections of the novel, they have not got two ape-knees to rub together, folks. So you have Frank Gresham Senior, who is a mild-mannered, again, inoffensive, fretful, fearful, dim-witted, failed politician and lawyer who is at the head of the family but needs to find a way of producing not only an income but a large fortune to pay off some debts. He is married to Lady Arabella, who has auspicious lineage of her own. She is a discourteous and pursed and vitriolic, sour snob, essentially. They have a child, young Frank Gresham Jr., as we shall call him, who is, as most gentlemen below the age of, or just when they go past the age of 14 or 15, find that, upon finding that a fluid exudes or issues from their appendage other than urine, finds that that's quite a pleasurable experience and is therefore a little bit of a wastrel and a sort of a boyish a hander out of his feelings, which is why when Mary Thorne, who has been fortunate enough to be essentially taken in by lots of the Greshams, she spends lots of their time with Beatrice and Augusta, who are also part of the family, Frank Jr.'s sisters. When Frank initially goes up to her and says, "Look, I quite fancy you, love," she thinks it's sort of boyish adoration and some quite, what would you say, feckless and sort of transitory stuff that he doesn't really mean. We find out that he pretty much does mean what he says. But yes, and the Lady Arabella says, "You can't marry Mary Thorne, Frank. She's a courteous and admirable individual. Personally, you could do nothing better. You could, find no one better. But of course, we're potless, and you need to find somebody that's going to give you an annuity and all sorts of other emoluments that you're going to need in the future." And so he is set up with a Miss Dunstable, who is the heiress to an empire that is predicated on the sale of the oil of Lebanon or something. Trollope is excellent at finding these really sort of bizarre and esoteric Ponzi schemes, much like the railway system in the way we live now. And it does that very well with the oil of Lebanon, which is supposedly sold by Miss Dunstable. She is a devious, cunning, sardonic, wily, very, very, very intelligent young lady with whom I should like to spend hour after hour with drinks. She is absolutely excellent, and of course keeps 4 or 5 lovers, which means that she retains some sort of recherche shock value. And some of the stuff she comes out with, she's got 4 lovers. She's lascivious and all the rest of it, which is not becoming of females of the time, and even today, folks, apparently. But, of course, Frank Gresham falls at her feet, and she rather maturely says, "You don't mean this, Frank, either. Go away." Lady Arabella is hounding him and hounding him and hounding him. And then, meanwhile, that Sir Roger Scatcherd, who killed Dr. Thorne's brother for having the temerity to impregnate his sister, has come away from prison and is now a very, very, very wealthy railwayman, a little bit of an engineer. He gets all sorts of government contracts. He has been anointed, essentially, as, Order of the British Empire. He's been, commended by the Queen herself, Miss Victoria herself. So he's Sir Roger Scatcherd. He's got, he's rich beyond the dreams of avarice and, has so much disposable income it would be, difficult to define. And him and Dr. Thorne have amazingly remained friends, and one day he continues with his bacchanalian habits. He swings the brandy back like no man's business. He makes George Best look like a nursery teacher, and that's an alcoholic footballer who sadly passed away for all concerned. And he, is still good friends with Dr. Thorne, and believe it or not, and he makes it known that in his will, it's obvious that he's going to perish, but rather soon. In his will, he leaves at least a third of his estate to the progeny of his sister. It must be, put forth by myself that Dr. Thorne has kept it a very closely guarded secret that Mary Thorne is indeed his niece, and is the product of that rather shameful get-together at the start of the novel. And so Roger doesn't even know that he's leaving it to anybody living. Which Dr. Thorne soon elucidates upon. We're also introduced to a Dr. Filgrave and a Mr. Moffat. One of the 2 or 3 Trollopian tropes that are almost continually or repeatedly reintroduced by Trollope in his books are an obsession with politics and of winning a seat into Parliament, and all of the trickery and sharp practice and the rife nature of bribery in some of those elections. And Mr. Moffat is running for office as well at the time. One trope that Trollope often uses, or one of the, Trollopian constants that are so often permeate his books, aren't here now. Because one thing that he often does is have, much made about the maelstrom of, the court of public opinion and of things being written in, many, many newspapers are often mentioned. That isn't done here, interestingly. But yes, so Frank then is sent by Lady Arabella away for a year because he's not been able to, pounce upon Miss Dunstable, and he comes back a much more worldly wise, slightly plumper individual with a very well-groomed beard, and is, manly now and mature instead of boyish. But his feelings have not waned for Miss Thorne, understandably, because she is... she's absolutely remarkable. She's got, everybody likes her, but nobody approves of her, I think is a decent way of describing it. And before long, Roger Scatcherd is stripped of his parliamentary privileges because, he's just a complete wastrel, essentially. Just brandy, and eventually does perish. And that then, of course, means that Dr. Thorne knows that Mary is in line for so very, very many gifts and an awful amount of money. She is Roger Scatcherd's complete heir, I think it might be described, or heiress. And so Dr. Thorne has got to, first of all, certify this, and that then brings into question Mary's suitability for Frank Gresham. Lady Arabella doesn't know about this yet. Frank Gresham Sr. doesn't know about any of this yet. And so you have, as Trollope so often does so very effectively, is he has the audience or the readership know exactly what is at stake, and yet lots of the characters are in annoying ignorance of the true reality of what is going on in the book, and it's absolutely marvellous. There are 1 or 2 set pieces that mean that Dr. Thorne is pretty much the central character in this book. Obviously, he's got to keep quiet about the potential of Mary Thorne's future wealth, but he's also got to stand against Lady Arabella, who has, again, the temerity to say that Mary Thorne is a decent, affable human being, but she is not. Her blood is not worth the consummation of my son. Yada yada yada. So yeah, I've got a few sections that I wanted to highlight. I didn't enjoy this quite as much as I usually enjoy Trollope's novels. Again, if you're new here, I have made it my civic duty to extol the virtues of this author. I think he's much underdone and much understudied and much wrongfully maligned as being a kind of a metronomic producer of prose rather than somebody that sits at a desk wistfully listening to a muse. And so I really do love Trollope, but I don't know. It just didn't quite have. I'm just fresh off the boat of his masterpiece, The Way We Live Now. So I didn't expect this to completely knock me off my feet. But it's perfectly enjoyable and has some mature themes and is really rather serious with a capital S, as I'm sure we can agree. But yes, a few sections I wanted to highlight, just give you a taste. So this is when we have Mary Thorne interpreting Frank Gresham's initial advances as we say, boyish excitability and what would you say, like a sort of the tenacity of a Rottweiler rather than something serious that a mature man would espouse. So we have, and yet she could not put him down as another young lady might put down another young gentleman. It is very seldom that a young man, unless he be tipsy, assumes an unwelcome familiarity in his early acquaintance with any girl. But when acquaintance has been long and intimate, familiarity must follow as a matter of course. Frank and Mary had been so much together in his holidays, had so constantly consorted together as boys and girls, that, as regarded her, he had not that innate fear of a woman which represses a young man's tongue, and she was so used to his good humour, his fun, and high jovial spirits, and was, withal, so fond of them and him, that it was very difficult for her to mark with accurate feeling, and stop with reserved brow, the shade of change from a boy's liking to a man's love. Now, that's characteristically Victorian in that I think that was pretty much one sentence, not one stoppage for breath hardly. But yeah, the delineation between a boy's liking and a man's love. Next up we have, so I think Trollope, again, is much underdone as a stylist. Everybody talks about how Dickens can string a sentence together, Henry James and whoever else, goodness knows who else. But this is talking about Sir Roger Scatcherd's appeal to the polity when he is vying for, political office. Sir Roger's eloquence was of a rough kind. This is the brandy-drinking bacchanal, but not perhaps the less operative on those for whom it was intended. The aristocracy of Barchester consisted chiefly of clerical dignitaries, bishops, deans, prebendaries, and such like. On them and theirs it was not probable that anything said by Sir Roger would have much effect. Those men would either abstain from voting or vote for the railway hero with the view of keeping out the de Courcy candidate. Then came the shopkeepers, who might also be regarded as a stiff-necked generation, impervious to electioneering eloquence. They would generally support Mr. Moffat. But there was an inferior class of voters, £10 freeholders and such like, who, at this period, were somewhat given to an opinion of their own, and over them it was supposed that Sir Roger did obtain some power by his gift of talking. Again, how many points of how many entry points into sentimentality and how much temperament and how much character is Trollope prying into? How many buttons is he pushing? He's just it's sprawling, as we might say nowadays. And this is now we're getting to the point where Mary realising that the marriage will probably be at least reputationally ruinous to him, gives him one final option via a very long letter to be, to have the match put off. But there let the bargain end. She would always remember that though it was in her power to keep her pledge, it might too probably not be in his power to keep his. That doctrine, laid down so imperatively by the great authorities of Greshamsbury, that edict, which demanded that Frank should marry money, that's repeated many times, he needs to marry money, had come also to her with a certain force. It would be sad that the fame of Greshamsbury should perish, and that the glory should depart from the old house. It might be that Frank also should perceive that he must marry money. It would be a pity that he had not seen it sooner, but she, at any rate, would not complain. And you could just see how accommodating she is for the feelings of others. But of course, as with most Trollope novels, it does end happily. But yeah, I think it's reasonably effective. Breaks the fourth wall as per usual. A bit of authorial intervention as is per usual. As is the want of Mr. Trollope. But yes, that pretty much covers the really erratic review of Dr. Thorne. Again, I am just feeling immeasurably grateful for all of your kind words on here. You have been overwhelmingly kind. Some may even say rather mawkish in the comments, but yes, I'm pretty much going to wrap that up here, folks. I will be doing a bookshelf tour later on in the week. I'm also going to start reading today, George Gessing's The Odd Women, another Christmas present. And what else shall I be doing? Oh, yes, I've put out a post this week for Q&A questions. If somehow you've got to the end of this video and haven't found a question to ask me, or indeed you want to, then please pop it down in the comments below. But yes, that will pretty much do for me today. Me and my diaphragm need to have a lie down. So yes, thank you ever so much for watching BookTube, and goodbye.